Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 163 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and we're coming to you once again from the intergalactic headquarters of GSM Services right here in, normally say in downtown Gastonia, but I'm not sure that matches with intergalactic, but we are going with the Space Force today. We have another great guest today. I'm very happy to have Jimmy McCallister on the podcast, who is a Maxwell certified speaker, coach, and trainer, and also a fellow Rotarian of mine. So we have a little bit of history and connections with Western Carolina, old neighborhood, multiple things. So I'm looking forward to hearing about his leadership and community journey. So Jimmy, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm really honored and humbled to be here at the intergalactic headquarters.
Yeah, that's
called
special.
on a number of world headquarters, of large retailers that I served over the years and companies I dealt with. But my first venture into the intergalactic.
Yeah, I hope this doesn't put us in orbit or anything. You know, we'll see what happens. So I appreciate the comments, but I'm not sure where this would land on your highlights of your life, but we'll see. We'll see. But anyway, it's great to have you on, and we like to get right to it. So, just tell us a little about yourself, Gaston County connections, family, career, anything that you want to share to get so our listeners can get to know a little bit about you.
Well, I moved to Gastonia in 2016 from Davidson, North Carolina, and at the time, we were tugged this way because our second grandchild had been born.
Yep.
They lived in Belmont. My wife was from Shelby, and I just it was one of those situations where we got tired of driving between Davidson and Belmont.
Sure.
So I've been here since 2016. But I grew up actually in a small town in West Virginia, Canova, West Virginia, and the pronunciation Canova. It's where Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia meet on the Ohio River.
Okay.
Just a fun fact: at one point in time, more bituminous coal.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Was shipped through that small town, loaded on barges on the Ohio River. A lot of transportation, railroad town, both the Chesapeake and Ohio and the Norfolk Western. A lot of history there.
Sure.
I was fortunate enough; it was a great place to grow up. I grew up in a great church, had just a phenomenal parents and 3 siblings. But I grew up, one of my high school very best friends, a guy I graduated with, a guy named Michael W. Smith, who's a very well-known Christian singer. He was a trailblazer there. One of my other teammates in high school was a guy named Donnie Robinson, who played with the 79 World Series champion Pirates. I was just with him a couple weeks ago. And then lastly, a guy who's really known for leadership these days, a guy named Brad Smith, who was CEO of Intuit, was one of my younger brother's good friends. Brad's come back to Marshall University, where he's serving as president and is just doing so much for that community and for rural Appalachia. So it's just a great place to grow up. I was very fortunate that God gave me a few gifts. I was an athlete in high school and was lucky enough to earn a basketball scholarship to Western Carolina.
Cullowhee.
In Cullowhee, the metropolis.
Listen, we love Silva and Cullowhee. As I mentioned, my son graduated from there a few years ago, and we love. Matter of fact, my wife and I have gone back a couple of times since he graduated, just for a weekend. We love that area.
Yeah, it's special. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be getting together with some old teammates. In about a month. We're going to have a basketball reunion up there. But it's interesting. I tell people 2 of the first teammates I ever met at Western were from Gastonia.
Oh, you got to be kidding.
A guy named Bubba Wilson, who actually Bubba played in the NBA, was probably the best player I ever played with in my high school and college career. And then a guy named Willie Hamilton. Willie's brother, Leonard, has just retired.
Oh, yeah, Florida State.
At Florida State.
And a Gaston College guy.
Yeah, he was back in the day, yeah. And another guy that played on our team was from Mount Holly, a guy named Zip Stowe, who Zip just retired as Parks and Rec manager over in Belmont. So I kind of knew Gastonia early on, and then as I got into some of my classes, some of my business classes, I met a ton of people from Gastonia. I thought I coined the phrase, it was Hunter Huss West. And I've connected with some of these guys. Jeff Haney's a guy that I knew up there for 3 years, a lot of my business classes together. He's a pilot. He's still flying for a private company, and he and his wife are someone I've reconnected with at church. But just great memories.
You're not going to believe this.
Of Western.
Jeff and I are cousins.
Really?
Yep. Yes.
Hey,
I mean, it's distant down the road, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Jeff was an old hooper at Hunter Huss, and there was 6 or 7 guys that I got pretty close with up there. It was pretty neat, and it was a great time to go to Western from an athletic standpoint. We had joined the Southern Conference with Marshall and UT Chattanooga. We had some great coaches in that league. Bobby Crimmins was at App. Les Robinson was at the Citadel.
Yeah.
I just really from Division I, year one, my freshman year to my senior year, I just played with a lot of great teammates.
What position did you play, if you don't mind me asking?
I was a shooting guard.
Okay.
Yeah. I could handle it a little bit, but we
pre 3-pointer days in college,
it was.
Right?
However, interesting fact, my senior year, I played with a guy that was a freshman. His name was Ronnie Carr. And Dr. Ronnie was the guy in 1980, the fall of 1980, the Southern Conference experimented with the three-point line.
Okay.
For the first time. Ronnie made the first collegiate three-point goal. And he was an amazing player.
Yeah.
And he has his own story, but I just always say, man, I was a year too late, right? But no, we played an up-tempo, fast-paced game, and I just loved my time there. Academically, too, I found myself. I always thought I was going to be an accounting major, and then I found out that when I got into intermediate accounting, a lot of time required for homework, and I opted for marketing. But I had some great professors, and Western being where it is attracted a lot of people back in the day that were retiring, and they still wanted to work and give back. And I just know I had 3 or 4 professors that had come from pretty impressive backgrounds. One of them was Patsy Scott, and she was in charge of the marketing over there. And Patsy, I just always remember her 4 P's of marketing, product, place, promotion, and price. And, we don't lead with price when we're in the sales and marketing world, right? We're selling outcomes. And that was something that just really resonated with me early on. And I just, I'm thankful for that time at Western. But, getting introduced to North Carolina, man, there were things I didn't know existed. Being from West Virginia, I wasn't north of the Mason-Dixon line, but at the same time, I didn't know what grits with eggs were. I didn't know that NASCAR was a lead story on sports every night. Right?
Around here it is, yeah. Maybe not as much as it used to be, but
wrestling was a real sport. Okay, right?
Maybe.
There was just always some of these unique things about North Carolina, and then I was introduced to Sundrop and cherry wine. I didn't know that was a Gaston County thing, but I kind of liked Sundrop, and man, pair that with a moon pie, and, that's gourmet food.
That's
right?
Legit Southern right there.
That is. So just some really good memories of Western, and I had again just a great time. Accomplished quite a bit. I was proud. We went D1 that freshman year. By my senior year, we were 17-10, like second or third in the conference. And I felt like I was part of the crew that really transitioned to add a captain with my senior year with a couple of my close friends, and who still remain friends. But I guess my biggest accomplishment, though, is I married very well. And I met my wife from Shelby there. My
at Western?
Wife at Western, okay. and 39 years, a wonderful, wonderful life we made, and we had 2 sons.
Okay.
And man, she supported me in my career. I had 40 years in sales and marketing. we moved from coast to coast. I was with Valvoline. We were in L.A. and we loved it.
Yeah, it's a little different maybe than West Virginia and North Carolina.
Yeah, and then we were in Chicago and Pittsburgh and even in Philadelphia.
So Pittsburgh would have been close to home, right?
Yeah, it was. It was just up the river. So we, I had all these opportunities. I'm thankful for that. And, I worked for some great companies. And then I served the world's largest retailers. I was in consumer packaged goods business. Okay. I sold everything and marketed everything from motor oil to shovels and rakes and non-powered outdoor lawn equipment to lighting. Now, my wife always questioned why I was in the lighting business. She's like, how in the world are you selling home decor products? But I was proof that, your skill sets are transferable.
Oh, sure.
And so, we had this wonderful life, and I was just so thankful that, she was there to support me every step of the way, for sure. So, with that extensive background and career, I just, all kind of came to a screeching halt around COVID. And the week she passed, and, the company I was working for, basically, COVID got them, and it was just a good time for me.
It was a strange time.
Stop,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's interesting. That's a lot. But I appreciate especially the Western Carolina stuff. I mean, we had a great experience. Our family did. My son did. He's engaged to someone he met at Western, so
awesome.
So that connection is great. But so hear a little bit about your business. What kind of inspired you to get into that line of work? Was it those professors in connections at Western, or was it something else?
Well, I think I was inspired early on, the sales and marketing track because of what happened at Western.
Okay.
And, my first assignment was with Valvoline Oil Company, and Valvoline was a Kentucky-based company.
Okay.
So I had connections there, and I just, I thought at the time, going to work for a large oil company, energy, it's in the early 80s, that was a good place to be. And it did me well for about 9 years. And over the course of, that 30 or 40 years, I stayed true with companies. I didn't job hop and jump around. I was with basically 4 companies in those 40 years. And
yeah,
I mean, in today's world, I think
that's unusual for today's world.
That's saying something.
We know well about that.
yeah. Retention, retention is huge.
It is.
I would find later on when I was managing this, I was general manager of a large company. We did outsource work for Lowe's. I had 3,000 employees, and try looking at that dashboard every morning, right? See who shows up for work, and just retaining people was a big part of it. Again, your leadership is so important. It's to creating the right environment, in terms of retention, and you've got to invest in people.
Sure.
Right. So that better than anyone here, what you've done at GSM. But what really in this phase of my life, I'm calling it my 2.0, right? This phase of my life, I was just motivated to how can I use my experience to give back, right? And to make a difference in the life of others. And I really struggled for a while with that after my wife passed is, what's next for me? What's my new why? Really, what's my purpose? And so about a year ago, I became certified with the Maxwell organization. And, now it's like, how can I serve others? How can I serve businesses? How can I serve, I've got this history with athletic teams. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then, my faith is a strong part of my life. And how can I share that and just make a difference in the life of others?
All right. So, before we started recording, we talked a little bit about, I'm a huge Maxwell fan. Matter of fact, I've researched myself how to get certified. And that's something I might pursue at some point. You think I'm 55, so many people think, oh, it's too late for that kind of stuff. Nah, it's never too late for that kind of stuff. It's never too late. I love the question, what's next? Matter of fact, that's our theme here at 2025 at GSM, is we have a theme each year, and what's next happens to be this year. And I love that question. No matter what's going on, what's next? Or So what, you mentioned this 2.0 getting into leadership. How have you taken your own experiences, leadership lessons that you've learned? I used to think I'm going to learn everything I need to know about business in college and then blah, blah, and unfortunately, like most people, I think it's most people, you learn a lot of these lessons the hard way, right? I mean, just getting out and doing it and paying attention and listening and interacting with people like yourself. And, we mentioned a few other people before we started recording too, that make an impact. If you're paying attention and you're listening and you try to take some from those interactions. But what are some of those, lessons you've learned or best advice you've gotten about leadership, on your journey?
Well, I just want to make one quick statement before I talk about that. Is when we quit learning, we quit living.
Correct.
That's what I say all the time, and
I agree.
I'm very passionate about that. Whether it's new technology, whether it's learning a new skill, it's all about personal growth, and particularly if you want to serve others, you've got to grow yourself.
Absolutely.
You have to lead yourself first, right? But on my website at jmacellevates.com, I have a John Maxwell saying on that first page: everything rises and falls on leadership. And, I've been just really blessed to have been around a lot of great leaders, both in my athletic career, coaching, and then in business. And I've seen it both as a supplier, and then I've looked across the desk, with these large retailers, Home Depot, Walmart, Target, and you could tell pretty quick what true leadership is all about, right?
Sure.
And who was doing it the right way. So that's great, and I've learned many lessons from that. But unfortunately, sometimes in life, you learn what good leadership doesn't look like.
Sure.
Too. And so one of the things that really struck home with me in one of Maxwell's book is called The Law of the Lid.
Yep.
And, leadership, like I say, it'll rise to the capabilities of, that leader or that leadership team. And I just say that, if you're not in a growth environment, right, or as a leader, you're not providing the resources to grow your people, because leadership is all about multiplication, right? We want to multiply all of this, knowledge and wisdom and how we value people and how we're pouring into them. And I think one of my last assignments, I knew there was a lid there. I just didn't know how abrupt and how quickly that ceiling was going to hit me. And so that was a lesson. That was a lesson learned. And that's really why I kind of took a step back in 2020 after my wife passed and didn't go back to work. So, again, growth environment's the key.
Right.
And that goes both ways. I go back to you have to lead yourself well in order to lead others. And that was a hard lesson I learned in one of those last assignments I had.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's an interesting concept, and we talk a lot about that here. But you also, you have to, like, if I'm not showing that I'm growing and learning and leading, I can't expect anybody else to. Right. I mean, you have to set that example if you're in that, in that position.
That word accountability is pretty powerful. And
right.
You first have to be accountable to yourself. And I talk a little bit about having these great daily habits. And, that acronym for GREAT with me is, goals, results, equipping, action, and truth. And I kind of measure those. What gets measured gets done, right? And I think you really have to live that as a leader, because I think people sense really quick your sincerity and more importantly your intentionality, right? And are you consistently delivering?
Yeah, accountability and consistency, I think, are important. Consistency of experience. Like my team here, they should know which Stephen to expect every day. It shouldn't be, hey, I wonder, is the good Stephen going to show up today or the bad Stephen going to show up? It should never be that. Now, I'm not going to say when I was younger, there was probably some of that going on. But I try to be really, another word I like is being intentional about these interactions and just intentional about what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish on a day-to-day basis. But it's a great point. I mean, you're right on. It's interesting too. I don't know if this was your experience too. When I was younger, my view of what leadership was is a lot different now than what I thought it was when I was 25 or whatever. It's so because the images I had, the experiences I had, I just it was always, I don't know, the guy out front cracking the whip, and the military leader always came to mind, which is good and bad. I mean, every organization has good and bad leaders, right? But that was just my image when I was younger, right? It wasn't about your own accountability, listening, helping other leaders grow. It was not about that, at least in my personal view when I was young.
I think that's a great point because, coming up when I did, I think this hierarchical, if they say it, it must be, it must be true. And
felt like it was
I need
more
to follow. I need to be a good follower, right? I need to be a good listener, and here's the mission. And a lot of times we get the mission without the,
without the
have
why.
A plan, but not a strategy, right?
Yeah.
Like what's the big picture? And I think leadership has evolved. I think, there's that word servant leader. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, I think they do a couple nice things. They think they're a servant leader, but it comes back to what we said. It's that consistency day in and day out and how you show up. And the other thing I've learned recently, and I think I did this in my career at some points, but like in my younger self, not always, is like you've got to meet people where they are.
Sure.
Okay? And you've got to clearly communicate the expectations. And I think today we just rely a lot. We rely a lot on not necessarily face to face. We rely upon, we were talking earlier about, before we got on about devices. And man, you can't hide behind a device.
No, you can't.
If you want to be that real leader. So I tell you, the other thing is, as a young leader, I think once I finally kind of got over myself and humbled myself a little bit,
That's
when
a good
I was
phrase,
challenged, because look, leaders need to be challenged too.
Oh, sure.
In a respectful manner. But that's how you earn respect, I think.
And well, I believe good leaders will accept that too.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So you mentioned, you used the phrase servant leadership earlier, and I like that concept. But I'm also a big fan of, I don't know if you know Pat Lencioni, who he is.
I've heard that name.
Well, he's somebody else I follow. He's got a great podcast, but he's a business leadership guy. He's written a couple of great books, like The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is one of them, The Motive. But anyway, when he talks about servant leadership, he doesn't like that phrase because there's no other type of good leadership, right? Well, you shouldn't have to use the word servant because good leaders are always servant leaders, and so that gives you the impression that there's some other type of good leader when we use that phrase. I just thought that was an interesting concept when I've heard him talk about that. Of course, we're talking about faith. I'm a Christian also, and so we believe who the best servant leader ever was as well. So that's another place you can go study that.
Well, I was going to mention that because Maxwell a year ago, he has a great book called High Road Leadership, and I've taught from that book.
Yep, I've read that myself.
But he did like a 2.0 on it, and it's Jesus, the High Road Leader.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I've seen it, and I've shared it with a couple people.
And it's just a great read because he was the greatest leader ever, right? And being a person of faith, I use that quite a bit, and a lot of times if we'll just ask our, and I realize there's some people listening may not, they might not be of our faith. But
absolutely. Yeah.
For those that are, I think, and Maxwell said this well, is do what Jesus did. Not what would he do, but what he did. And when you think about decisions you're having to make, and really, if I could talk to my younger self, I would have relied upon my faith a lot more in my business career. That's what I'd tell my 20-year-old self.
Yeah, that's funny. That's good.
Because I think for many years I was a sideline Christian.
Yeah.
You know, I believed in Jesus, but like I did not.
Yeah, when I was young, it has no place in business.
Yeah, right. But all of Maxwell's leadership,
this
is what I love about it, is biblically based. And, you know, he was a pastor for years. Then he took it to a secular world.
Yeah.
And so it's the greatest example ever. And I truly believe that.
I think that's a good segue, kind of, you know, leadership. And I know we've already touched on community, but you know, what role, so to speak, does community play in this journey you're on, in your work, your mission? You know, I mentioned we're fellow Rotarians, and so organizations like Rotary. How does all that tie in together?
Well, I just think, you know, if you want to feel better about yourself, go do something for someone that maybe can't repay you or reciprocate. And I feel very strongly about that. My dad set a great example for me. He served on city council. He went to the Huntington City Mission and taught once a week. You know, he was involved in just a number of civic organizations. So I had a good example. But, you know, I always go back to, you know, if you want to make a difference in the life of someone, just go do something with your time. It doesn't take money. But there's a great story my high school coach always told about Hattie Mae Wyatt, young girl in Philadelphia back in the 1800s, who overheard her minister at the Grace Baptist Church in North Philly. I lived in Philly, so I know where it's at. Heard him say that, you know, the church just didn't have room for everyone, particularly children. Their Sunday school rooms weren't large enough, and they really needed to build a larger church. And anyway, little Hattie died about 2 years later. Her mother found underneath her pillow an envelope with 57 cents in it and a note that said, "This is to build a larger church." And I can still see my high school coach, who was a gruff guy and would grab your face mask in a New York Minute, almost to the point of tears, telling the story, because what that minister did, Russell Conwell, is he took those 57 cents, turned it into 57 pennies. He created the Wyatt Foundation. That 57 cents went on to raise enough money for them to buy this large home, which eventually became Temple University in Philadelphia. And it's all about the multiplication. And we think, oh, well, I can't give that $100 donation, so I'm just not going to give. Well, you know, give what's on your heart and what you can afford, and give your time. And I just think that's a good example of, you know, being involved in your community, wherever you're at. Your time and however small, it makes a difference.
Right.
Because being a person of faith, I know God will multiply it, right? And he will put that in front of the right
Sometimes
people.
you don't see it either, though.
No,
and you have to take that on faith that
You
it's
do. You do.
We want that proof, right?
Yeah, but I'm also involved outside of Rotary, and I think Rotary, I've just joined this year. It's been a great experience for me thus far. I want to become even more active this year in some of the volunteering roles that are available. But I got involved in May and June in Fellowship of Christian Athletes as a volunteer, and
they've been a guest on here.
Austin Robinson.
Yeah.
Who's the regional director here, and I connected, and I've spoken at a couple of their camps. That we've got a jamboree coming up. They're having one this weekend at Bessemer City, here in Gaston County, and then at Stuart Kramer in a couple of weeks. I'm going to speak to all the teams there as well, and you know, it's just my way to give back and you know, give that you know, hope of, you know, what a personal relationship with Jesus can do in your life. And they just do so many good things to equip not only young men and women, but their coaches. And, you know, that coach can be very influential in the life of a kid.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, for those that are interested, I got to give these guys a little plug. It's fcagastoncounty.org. And if you want to get involved, again, doesn't have to be monetary. It
Sure.
can be volunteer time, just mentoring a kid.
Yeah, it's been a long time. It might be time to get Austin back on to give some updates.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a long time
because he's got
since
a
he was
lot
on.
of good things going on,
Yeah.
and it's growing. There's been tremendous growth, for sure.
So, kind of staying on the same line, but does anything jump out at you when you think over time, excuse me, something that stands out you're most proud of professionally, community service-wise, just anything that stands out in your mind?
I just think a couple things. One, I know that, I say this humbly. I've been able to have incredible relationships with some of the people that work with me. I'm not going to say for me, that worked with me. I had this national account manager one time when I was vice president of sales at Ames True Temper, and when I left that company, I told him it's one of the best days of my life because you and I truly can be friends now in a good way, and we still have that friendship. But I would just say growing and multiplying my influence with, throughout my business career.
Right.
That's been rewarding because when you've made a difference in someone's life, that's huge. But from a volunteer standpoint, I had the opportunity. My son was the head coach at Gaston Day for the boys basketball team from like 2015 to I think through 23. He was there about 8 years. And I used my love of the game. I volunteered. I did a little bit of everything. I did everything from washing uniforms to scouting. But, after my wife passed, he wanted me on the bench. And I can just tell you that it's all about the relationships. I think that's to see these young men now. Nate Hinton's a kid that's in the NBA right now. He just came back this past weekend and put on a free clinic, 2-day clinic for a number of kids here in Gaston County.
Went to Houston, right?
Yes, he went to Houston. Now he's in Memphis. Yeah. But to see young men and knowing, they're giving back the way they are. Off of our last team at Gaston Day, we've still got 3 kids playing in college. We've got kids that have started their own business. There's kids working on Wall Street. There's one that will soon be an attorney that played on the 2018 team. Just to see that, in a small way, I had an impact on them as a coach. Is huge. And
I coached 12 years through the First Methodist, youth sports program when my kids were coming through, and I still see kids, and of course now they're older. They're all out of college or in college, or and they some of them they still call me coach. Right? It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, that's I'm still known as Coach Pops, and so I really said I love it because it's I got more. Oh yeah. Than they did.
That's my experience too with doing any type of work like that.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. Pretty cool.
What about through your time? Looking back, any key factors in your success? What success? Because I'm going to go on a limb here from my perspective. About pretty much every measure, you're probably defined as a success across the board. So, what key factors in business? Anything that you'd like to share there when you look back?
I think the one thing is I was able to build relationships. I think, to me, that's what, if you want to drive community within your own family, all walks of life, it's all about the relationships. And I think I was a connector. I was able to connect with people.
Right.
And I think when you can, when you're authentic and people trust you, there's a lot to be said about that. And I think that's always strive for that. I think we talked earlier about what's next. I think I had that next play mentality. Like, look, when you're in sales and marketing, you hear that word no a lot too, right?
Oh yeah.
And I had a boss one time that said the selling doesn't start until the buyer says no. Yeah. Right? Garrison.
That's funny.
Ex-Marine.
Yeah.
He was he was just very passionate about that. And I just think setbacks happen in life. 10% of life's what's happened. 90% is how you deal with it. So just keeping that momentum and having that sense of urgency, but showing up every day, I think those are all great keys.
You mentioned these devices earlier. Do you think technology in general makes it more difficult to develop those relationships?
I would tell you.
I just threw you a curveball there.
No. That's a great question. I think it's like anything else. You have to have balance, right? And I think that you can use it to your advantage to work harder, maybe not harder, but maybe smarter.
Okay.
But I think people still need and want authentic communication, and I just think you can't hide behind the device.
Well, I also think we've seen or shown, I think, through COVID what some of that disconnection caused, right?
Yeah,
I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but it just seemed like that lack of connection. I know, like my kids, one of them kind of thrived through some of that online stuff, but one of the other ones did not at all. I mean, really struggled with just trying to learn sitting in front of a screen without going to class, without interacting with classmates, So it can be an individual thing. That's just something that comes to mind with my own personal experience. And I think that applies. Remote work can be business-wise. Sometimes for some companies that's terrific, but boy, I think you lose some of that connection with coworkers. And you mentioned the phrase, and I believe this. You got to meet people where they are, especially if you're leading people. I think as a leader, you have to be engaged enough to know where they are.
Exactly.
And that disconnection can just make that more difficult, I think.
And I think I think this remote work move, the great escape that occurred during COVID, where people just basically picked up and moved where they wanted to live.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean, that was real.
Oh, yeah, it was. I agree.
And so the company I was working for pre-COVID, we had a lot of remote folks. Matter of fact, we were headquartered in Florida. I wasn't going to move to Florida, so we had an office in Mooresville, right? And then eventually, and this to me was a God thing. I ended up just working out of my home the last 2 years, reporting to the CEO, and I think I was just as productive, but I had the right mindset.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And it was an adjustment. But what I miss, because I worked in these headquarter locations for years too. I missed the water cooler talk, right? Yeah. I missed, getting a small impromptu 15-minute. Like, look, we meeting ourselves to death sometimes.
Sure,
right?
that can happen.
But in this case, I think that, again, I'll go back to the personal touch. You lose it. Yeah. And you always don't see body language on Zoom, right? We were doing Zoom calls and everything else so I had all these friends in the business who were like, man, I am lost. I have to get on this Zoom call. Half the time I can't even get my video working. It was just, it was a weird.
Now it's just secondhand, right? We just
now
do it.
Everyone loves it, right? I just wish I'd have bought stock in that in about 2018, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have a couple every week with groups and organizations I'm involved with, some kind of video conference or something,
Yeah, but I still think face-to-face, and that's what I always would tell my sales and marketing people. Your face has to be in the place, particularly when you're serving. We were serving large retailers. Like, that face time was valuable, and it better be meaningful, right? When you're dealing with a Walmart or, Amazon's basically gone away. They're self-managed. The way they purchase, you have a line review with them. They're looking at product. Samples, send a few in. Yeah, we're good to go, right? Basically it's consignment type programs, right?
That's
so
interesting.
So that's changed. And where this will all go, I don't know, but still the Targets and Depots and Lowe's, some of those, major mass retailers where I spent, a ton of time, it's still about authentic face-to-face relationships, which means you better be prepared, better be bringing the value, right? What's your plus one today?
Yeah.
What am I taking that no one else has? How am I differentiating myself? All those things still I think are very important, and I think will continue to be important. But we have a whole sector of our workforce today. They only know one way, and it's behind the device.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. It's just,
So I think there's going to be a need for that leadership.
yeah. And be aware of that.
Yes.
I mean, I'm old enough to know that the 25-year-old or younger that we're hiring has a different, they were raised differently than I was. So we just have to be aware of that and understand what that means and how does that translate into what we're trying to accomplish.
Pardon me. I do think that technology, I've embraced technology. Okay. There's certain messaging things. I use AI. I think we talked a little bit before we got started. AI has incredible capabilities, but look, it's all about the input.
Yeah, I'm utilizing AI or interacting with AI every single day.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't realize I'm interacting with AI
exactly.
in some form. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm not saying don't embrace it. Don't embrace technology. I just think you have to balance it. And I think there's still, if you're serving customers with a service or a product, you still have to have that personal touch.
So what's next for Jimmy McCallister 2.0?
Well, I just want to continue. I'm building this business as a speaker, a corporate coach and trainer. I want to continue to impact business. I'm going to start in the fall a podcast on coaching. Whether you're an athletic coach, whether you just need help with leadership. I'm going to start a weekly podcast, just updating some things I'm seeing in the industry and what's going on, more of a service. But I conduct workshops, masterminds, lunch and learns, those type of things for companies. So, I want to build upon that. But what I've really got a passion about, and I've spent the last 6 to 7 months doing, is I'm going to become an author here soon.
Okay.
So I have a book that's going to be released here this fall.
Let's go ahead and touch on it.
Well, I kind of, like I said earlier, I kind of struggled a little bit, man. I was kind of stuck after COVID and my wife passing away and what's next. And, I had an incredible circle and network of people that really leaned into me, okay? And I just, at one point, late last year, I thought, God put on my heart, I need to write about this. And hey, it's helped me.
Sure.
More than anything. I'm not going to sell a lot of books, okay? And you don't write a book to sell books, okay?
Unless you're John Maxwell, maybe.
Well, exactly. Unless you got a publisher and you're a New York Times bestseller, right? Yeah. But, my book is titled Umbrella in the Rain, and it's about a beautiful story about my wife and something she did for someone in service and out of love, and provided shelter for this little man that was just getting drenched in a storm. And so it just kind of prompted me. That kind of became my why. Like, what's next? And so I just started writing a lot of notes, and then it became, well, I think I can write a book here, right? And really what I do is take people through grief, right? Because none of us are getting out of here alive, right? I mean, we're all going to face it. Someone we dearly love that we're going to lose in our lifetime. But also, how do you manage life's storms? Because in addition to grief, we all deal with that. I just spoke to someone recently that had a cancer diagnosis, okay? We've all been touched by that. Even my own mother, my aging mother, she had a fall a couple of weeks ago. And I said this earlier, 10% of life is what happens to you, 90% is how you choose to deal with it. And so what I want to do is use this book to, tell people that are going through that grief journey, look, what you're feeling is normal, okay? And here's some things that I did, and here's some things that helped me, right? And I have a dear friend that lost her husband, and she's had wonderful input. I have a family friend that's lost 2 adult children, and how they dealt with it. And so
that's not supposed to happen, right?
No, it's not. And so through my season of loss, what I want to really convey the message is, it's a journey. You never forget it, but God can use it for the good. And, I just feel like I want to show that I have this resiliency. I will always honor, my wife and just, everything she did and how she loved so well. But, the story continues. Her legacy moves on, and I just think it's good that I can provide some concepts and maybe some strategies for people that are walking through that season of loss.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a 5-year period for me from 2016 to 21. It's not this. Please don't take this. It's not the same. I haven't lost my spouse, luckily, but my father-in-law, my father, and then we had a crazy incident here at our company that we dealt with. So yeah, I didn't realize during the time of how much it impacted me. You know what I mean? When I was in the middle of it, it took some later talking to people who understood better, and to your point about, and I didn't have the wherewithal to go find something to read to help me with that. I mean, I had a few people helping me, and I did eventually go talk to someone who really helped. But yeah, I think I don't know if it's that. There's just this not stigma. That's not the right word, but it's just I just didn't realize how much it would impacted me. I'll just leave it at that. And it's if I'd known better, I would have done something sooner. Because it's such those events are so impactful.
Well, and I was given all types of self-help books, and first 6 months, people really poured into me, and I write about family and friends in one of my chapters. But I'll tell you, I went to Grief Share probably about 2.5 years later. That really helped me.
Okay.
But, within a year, and so subtitle my book's Navigating My Season of Loss. And within a year, I lost my wife. I lost one of my high school coaches who really had a big impact, on my life. And then I lost my father. So, for that year, and when my dad passed, I thought, I'm ready for this. And then you're just I've gone through the worst. No, you don't. Your journey continues, and everyone's journey's different.
It is.
And so, all these feelings and emotions, it's okay to have them, right? But you can't stay stuck. And that's what I think will resonate with the readers once I finish this, is you can move forward, okay? You don't forget, you move forward with grace and God's mercy in my case.
So we're going to put you on the spot. Okay. Or maybe a better thing is to put you on the clock. Do you have a time frame that you're hoping to get this finished? Are you self-publishing, or
I will have it published in Kindle form on Amazon October 1st.
Okay.
I will, and then I'm going to self-publish, and I'm still finalizing that plan. Yeah. I don't want to give it all to Amazon.
That's quick.
I don't want to give it all to Amazon. No, I feel pretty good.
That's just under 2 months.
Well, and I feel pretty good about it because, hey, look, for every 1,000 people that start a book, only 6 of them finish.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
And that's tough. And then I listened to I was on a Maxwell call yesterday, and this financial person was on there who just finished a book. It was 3 years. And so I feel pretty good about it. And it's been a season of my life, and it's helped me heal too. Yeah. It really has. And so, I'll be more than happy to come back and talk a little bit about that.
All right. We would love to do that sometime. So appreciate you touching on all that, Jimmy. And, obviously you take the time to come on and talk to us. We want to give you opportunity to share that kind of stuff. So a few more questions, and we'll finish this episode up. I know you've got, we both got to. Well, I'll let that go. Sorry, I'm getting ready to say some smart-aleck comment, but I won't do that about time. Remember, this is a podcast about Gaston County, so we try to share. And you've been here long enough now to be answer this question. So, from your perspective, why would you say that Gaston County in general in the area is such a great place?
Well, we talked a lot about community, and I think there's just a strong foundation here, community-wise. In a lot of cases, my younger son and a couple of his friends, we'd always we always say Gaston County, man, we feel like we're back in Parkersburg, West Virginia, or Huntington, West Virginia, these communities. And, they do have some similarities. You went through the tough times, textiles, moved out. We went through the tough times. My dad was a steel worker. The company he worked for is still in business, but you can go up and down the High River, and all these plants have been mothballed, right? So some similarities there too, right? But I think the big thing is, the backbone of this community and a lot of the communities I lived in West Virginia, the two I lived in, were, small business. And I just think, my wife, we moved to Davidson in 2003, and we lived up there in River Run, and my wife was like, Jimmy, I don't feel like I've moved back to North Carolina, right? And, and it spoke to the region. There was a lot of transit people moving in and whatnot, and our very best friends, they're not native North Carolinians, but, we loved them, okay? But
might not be Shelby.
No, we moved to Gastonia, and we really felt like we were back in North Carolina. And I just think there's something to be said about the work ethic here. There's a strong work ethic, small business rules, a lot of successful, long-term GSMs of the world here in Gaston County. And I think what really, to me, the bypass around Shelby is going to be completed soon. I just think things are going to start moving west here. And there's still a lot of dirt being dug here.
Oh, yeah.
And I always tell my friends, like the whole time I was living in Davidson for 13 years, I was like, man, they just keep turning dirt. And I see that here. And actually, I'm living in Belmont now. And Belmont reminds me a lot of Davidson when I first moved
That's
to
probably
North Carolina.
fair. That's probably fair.
And, a lot of repurposed buildings, things going on downtown there. I live right downtown, and I love it. There's there's that sense of community. And then I think what really makes Gaston County unique is all these other small towns within the county.
Sure. That's a little unique.
Yeah, that is. And so I think that's pretty cool.
We're going to get into some of these questions I would really like that we like to finish up with. And you may have touched on some of these a little bit already, but one of my favorites is, knowing what you know now, Jimmy, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Well, I mentioned earlier. I think,
you did, yeah.
I think balance is a good thing, okay? I would find a little more balance between my work life and my family life. You don't get that. I did everything I could, and thank goodness I was in a position for most of my career where I could somewhat dictate my schedule. So, being at school activities and things for my sons were pretty important. So, but, I was gone a lot too. And I say that more for my wife, right? She was in charge, right? So she was running that household many times. And, I get that when I get home, sometimes the boys would be like, hey, Dad, can we talk? What'd you do? Well, it's not about me, it's about Mom. And I'm like, I just wish I had more of a presence there, and I would have had balance. But
fair enough.
And I think too, relying on my faith more in business. And I would tell any 20, 25-year-old, don't lose track of that. If you have that personal relationship, build on it, grow it. It'll only help you, right?
Yeah.
And then I didn't take this advice, but I had two professors at Western. Now, this is 1980, the spring of 80. And you can relate to this. And I went in, and I was trying to decide, do I want to go to grad school? Because I could have gone and become a grad assistant coach at a different – I thought maybe I wanted to be a coach. And they were like, oh, you can go back to grad school anytime, man. You need to come with us. And I'm like, what? And they said, yeah, we're moving to Charlotte. And one guy had lived in New York. Both of them were from New York. And they said, and I forget the name of the bank, we're going to Charlotte, and we're going to work for a bank over there. And Charlotte, North Carolina, is going to become the banking center of the United States. And I'm sitting there going, wow, like.
And it practically
really?
has almost, yeah.
And it has. I might have listened to Dr. Wyatt, right? and gone to Charlotte because we love North Carolina. It took us years to get back here, right? And but it was, it was the best 10 to 15 years of our marriage was when we got back here,
right? So
I would have probably gone in that direction.
That's funny. What about somebody stands out, maybe more than one person, has a huge impact on you? Mentor, business, professional, personal, just anything that stands out?
Well, I think I've mentioned my father. My father just was that, he was that mentor. Never quit being my mentor. He from encouragement to telling me to value all people. When I took my first job with Valvoline, I remember him saying, "Hey, you're going to be meeting a lot of people. You treat them all with respect. Value everyone. I don't care what their job is. Okay, you're going to be calling on customers. You may be managing people someday. Value people." And, I have to go to Coach Ward and Coach Kirkgrave, my two high school coaches, both strong Christian men that helped mold a community. So I saw what, really leadership was all about. And it was more than just the fact that we won a few state championships and, we had this great, they helped mold a community. I always laughed. We didn't need a police force in my little town. Coach Ward we had 10 o'clock curfew. He was out there, making sure. And I was never late because with him, last one there was late. So, and the preparation, they taught me so many life lessons.
Right.
And, we were talking earlier about John Maxwell. I've had the opportunity to meet him, but I've poured into his book, particularly last year, and he's someone that's really had a huge impact, even before I joined Maxwell. But more recently, in the last 5 years, Dr. Ellis Fisher. And, God has put some amazing people in my pathway. But to meet Ellis 6 weeks after my wife passed, I mean,
that wasn't a coincidence.
It very much was, the God stepping in.
Right.
And he's been a model for what servant leadership really is. And I'm amazed at all he continues to do, from holy angels to how he serves our church to how he mentors, young students. The guy's just amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
And this community has been the beneficiary.
Yeah, we talked a little bit before we started recording, but I mentioned that joining Rotary, getting to reconnect with some people like him, but specifically, Ellis has made a big positive impact on me. Yeah, for sure.
I don't know that I'd be sitting here today if I had met Ellis. I probably would have. I never wanted. My son moved to Asheville a couple of years ago. I thought about moving, but man, I was grounded here.
Yeah.
And I think Ellis had a huge part in it. I'm just lucky to call him friend.
So, last question, Jimmy. And this is one that we kind of added in the more recent recordings. But if you could have coffee with one historical person, who would that be and why?
Well, I thought about this for a while, but again, I told you I've had some unbelievable opportunities in my career, and one of them came in 1986 when I was working in Los Angeles for Valvoline. We had a sports advisory committee after the '84 Olympics.
Okay.
And they asked me to go to the first meeting. I had a sports background, our PR firm's there, our ad agency's there, and we had a number of coaches from all type of Olympic sports. And they said, "Jimmy, John R. Wooden is going to be here today.
Wow.
And we'd like you to really sit with him and greet him." And, I was just taken back because as a youngster and growing up, I
arguably the greatest.
There's no question.
Arguably the greatest coach,
yes.
Not just basketball coach, but arguably the greatest coach
and teacher. He considered himself a teacher.
Wooden on Leadership is a terrific read too.
Yes.
I mean,
yes, and I've poured into it, but I got to have dinner with him 3 times.
Oh man!
And
wow.
And then the second time he brought his daughter along with him, and I was just like a sponge. And he has his 2 sets of 3s rules, make every day is your masterpiece. We get a clean sheet every day.
The success pyramid.
Yes, the success pyramid.
Yeah.
You could just go on and on. But the first time I met him, my wife was pregnant with our second son, Trent. And, he was asking me about it. It was the first time he'd been out in public since his wife, Nell, passed away.
Oh, wow.
And they had an incredible marriage. Everything had to be John and Nell Wooden. Even the court is named for the 2 of them at UCLA. But I'll never forget, he told me the greatest gift you can give, your children is to love their mother. And I never forgot that. And he just had such an impact, on my life. So I read all his books and, followed him. And, this is a day before phones and, you got your,
Yeah.
You can take a picture anywhere. And I just so value those conversations. And I think about them a lot because this man was more than a coach. He was a mentor. He was a leader in every way.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm one of those folks that are lucky,
yeah.
really lucky, to have had the opportunity to meet someone. Particularly, I love the game of basketball, and it's done well for me. I made a great decision when I was 18 years old. I had much better offers to go play college football, but I had this love for basketball, and I used it, to really, set my life in motion, and I'm just, I said here, I'm a pretty lucky guy.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. To your point about what John Wooden told you, I did. Speaking of Ellis Fisher, when our son was born, our first child was born, our insurance took us to his practice, and the very first thing he told us on the very first visit with our son was the best thing you do for your son and any future children you have is do whatever you can to keep your marriage strong, which is a similar, is a similar advice to what John Wooden said. So, and I never forgot that. And that's almost 27 years later. I still remember that very clearly. So, and in the silly insurance world, we ended up having to go to a different pediatrician with our kids because of insurance. I just, that drives me thinking back.
Oh,
I'm
I know.
So anyway, that was super impactful. So listen, Jim, I appreciate you sharing all this. Any last words, anything you want to finish this episode off with before we close it out?
No, I just really am humbled to be here today and thank you for this opportunity to share. And, it's been good to get to know you during our conversation here today.
Absolutely. It's been great. I appreciate your insights. I appreciate your vision and what you're doing. And so, I normally share a book or a quote or something, but I'm going to share a couple books actually for our listeners, that you've mentioned. I'm going to go with John Maxwell, but you mentioned The Law of the Lid earlier, and that's probably from me, my favorite book of his, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. But gosh, he's got books like that High Road Leadership is one of his most recent books, which is really good. It's sitting on my desk. The 5 Levels of Leadership is another one that I really like. And I haven't read all 90 plus of his books, but I've read 10 to 15. The other one is on, the one I really like is 15
Laws of Personal Growth.
Thank you. 15 Laws of Personal Growth. That's another one that I have read. So anyway, I would just encourage listeners, if you're interested in that type of stuff, I think in our modern times, John Maxwell was probably considered the leadership guru, of our times. And so I would encourage you. And listen, if you're a podcast person or YouTube, you can go find anything and everything you want to learn about leadership if you research John Maxwell. So what about you? Where can listeners go find more? I know you mentioned your website, but let's make sure we get that. Anything else you'd like to share? How can listeners find a little more out about your business and what you're doing?
I'd say go to my website, jmacelevates.com.
Okay, is it just the letter J, M-A-C?
J-M-A-C.
Okay.
Elevates. gaston's.com.
Okay.
And
Very
that's
good.
where they can get in touch with me. And I'd love to converse with them. And again, I've spent the last 7 months really kind of pouring into this book.
Okay. Well, I'm looking
so
forward to that.
I'm excited to get that behind me and also start teaching from the book.
Okay.
Because there's a story to be said about how we choose to deal with life storms, right?
Yep.
So anyway, no, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jimmy. It's been a great episode. I look forward to getting this one released. So, to our listeners out there, thanks so much for taking time to listen to today's episode. Please continue to spread the word if you can about the podcast, and please don't hesitate to contact us here at the email address, which is podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And please follow us on all the social media platforms. Thanks again to Jimmy for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Rachel Cowart from GSM Services. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.